vast tapestry of human history, stories of power, survival, struggle, and identity weave together to reveal the depths of our shared experience. Across centuries and continents, the lives of those long past whisper lessons about resilience and the indomitable spirit. This journey invites you to step gently into 4 vivid narratives, each revealing a world at once distant yet profoundly connected to our own. We begin in the harsh, unvarnished reality of medieval life, where survival was a daily battle against disease, hunger, and social rigidity. Then, we traverse to the grand courts of 18th century Russia, tracing the rise of Catherine the Great, a woman who shaped an empire through sheer will and vision. Next, we uncover the mysteries of ancient Maya civilization through the discovery of the Red Queen's tomb, shining light on women's powerful roles in a world often written by men. Finally, we delve into the life of Frida Kahlo, whose art transformed personal pain into universal symbols of resistance and identity. Through these stories, we honor the forgotten, the powerful, and the creative, recognizing that history is not just about kings and monuments, but about the human spirit enduring across time. Let us begin. Before the sun breaks the horizon, the village lies cloaked in silence and shadow. Mud brick homes huddle together beneath a sky littered with stars, the mighty Nile flowing nearby, carrying life and death along its winding path. Inside one such home, Menket awakens. His body aches deeply, a dull, persistent reminder of years spent beneath scorching suns and crushing stones. He lies on a thin mat, the coarse fibers rough against his skin. Around him the air is thick with smoke and the scent of unwashed bodies. The room is small and cramped, barely wide enough for his family to sleep. Rats skitter across the dirt floor unbothered by human presence. His wife, Nefret, breathes softly beside him, her face etched with lines far older than her years. Their children sleep in a tangled heap of tattered cloth and blankets. The youngest, Anpu, coughs quietly, his small chest rising and falling with effort. Outside, the first murmurs of life stir, the low bleating of goats, the distant crowing of a rooster, the gentle rustle of palm leaves in the cool pre-dawn breeze. The smell of the river drifts in, a mingling of wet earth, blooming lotus, and distant smoke from village fires. Menket sits, slowly rubbing the stiffness from his back. His hands, calloused, cracked, and worn, reach for a small clay cup filled with sour barley beer, the only sustenance before the day's grueling work. Nefret stirs, rising carefully so as not to wake the children. She stokes the fire, coaxing embers into a small flame. Over it, she warms thin barley porridge, adding a pinch of wild herbs to mask its bitterness. Breakfast is meager, but it must suffice. Outside, other villagers stir. Women balance clay jars on their heads, carrying water drawn from the muddy riverbank. Children chase chickens and try to find morsels to eat. The air is filled with whispered prayers, pleas for strength, for safety, for the favor of the gods Ptah and Hathor. As dawn breaks, Menket wraps a rough linen cloth around his waist and ties a dusty turban to shield his head from the sun's coming heat. He kisses his wife and children, fear and determination warring in his heart. The village assembles, a slow-moving river of tired bodies heading toward the construction site where the Great Pyramid rises. Each step is heavy, every breath labored. future is uncertain, but the weight of legacy presses on. The sun climbs, burning away the chill of morning, revealing the immense scale of the pyramid. Stone blocks lie heaped like mountains, awaiting their place in eternity. The sound of labor fills the air, wood scraping on stone, voices shouting orders, the steady rhythm of human effort. Menket grips a heavy rope, muscles straining as the block slides slowly forward. Sweat runs in rivers down his face. The sun's fire feels relentless. As the day wears on, fatigue seeps deep into bones. Blisters form, backs ache, throats burn with dust and thirst. Yet, amid the hardship, small moments of connection persist. A shared joke, a brief smile, a helping hand. For the workers, the pyramid is more than stone. It is a testament to endurance, to their place in history, even if their names will be lost. As twilight descends, the laborers return to the village, bodies battered but spirits unbroken. Families reunite around sparse meals, sharing stories of the day and whispering prayers for those who did not return. Night falls once more, carrying with it the weight of fatigue and hope. The cycle will repeat. Dawn will come again, bringing both hardship and the promise of survival. In this relentless rhythm, the story of Menket and his village is etched, silent, unseen, yet foundational. Puller, but years had slowed him. Now he steadied. His eyes watched every movement, every slip of rope or twitch of panic. Once the block had fallen, it had crushed a young man's leg. He had screamed until his voice turned raw, and then had lain in the sand, shaking. The overseers had dragged him away, muttering about bad omens. They didn't even bother hiding the blood. Menket remembered the boy's name, Kebi, barely 17. Now the pyramid claimed him, as it had claimed so many others. They continued to pull, and when they paused, it was only to shift the sled or drink water from shared clay jars. The water was hot, muddy, and tasted faintly of copper, but it was wet, and that was enough. The sun climbed higher. The sand turned white with light. Shadows vanished. The air shimmered. Around midday, the team broke for a short rest. They gathered under a worn linen canopy. It offered little protection, but enough to make them feel briefly human. Bread was passed around, hard, dry, flavored with nothing. A few lucky men had dried figs or garlic cloves. They ate in silence, chewing slowly, eyes vacant. Menket leaned back against a block of stone. His muscles twitched with exhaustion. Across from him, an older man coughed violently into a rag. "Another year," someone muttered. "Another stone," another replied. They laughed, not from humor but from the absurdity of it all. As they sat, the foreman approached. "2 more loads today," he said. "The priests have ordered a statue to be lifted into place by sunset. The king wishes it done before the festival." Grumbles, but no argument. They returned to work. The statue was enormous, an image of the king in divine form, carved from granite. It had taken years to shape. Now it was to be hauled up the main ramp, placed into a carved niche in the pyramid's northern face. The climb was brutal, steep, treacherous, but it was the final task. They strained with every muscle. Menket's vision blurred, his shoulders burned. Blood from open blisters mixed with sweat and dust on the ropes. Hours passed, and then it was done. The statue sat in its place, staring blankly into eternity. The men collapsed. They lay in the sand, panting like beasts. The overseers nodded. "You'll live to see tomorrow. Be thankful." That night, back in the village, Nefret greeted Menket with a bowl of onion soup. He ate slowly. She rubbed his shoulders. He didn't speak. Outside, the stars turned. The pyramid stood taller. And tomorrow, the grind would begin again. But that was not the end. The next day brought with it a different challenge: river transport. At times, the stone blocks arrived not just from nearby quarries, but floated down the Nile on large rafts lashed together with thick rope. When water levels were low, the workers had to wade out to meet them, their feet slipping in the mud, hands raised to catch cargo that might crush them if it fell. Menket hated river days. The water was unpredictable, sometimes kind. Sometimes it took lives without reason. On this day, the river had risen unexpectedly from a faraway rain. The currents were strong, the rafts unstable. Still, they had orders. They wrestled the stone from the raft. One slipped. Menket shouted, grabbing a rope. His hand burned. His knees scraped sharp wood. The stone tilted, then crashed. No one was killed, but the block was cracked. Unusable. They all knew what this meant. The overseer's fury. That evening, Menket stood with the others as the overseer demanded names. He refused to speak. So did the rest. The overseer picked 3 at random and beat them with reed sticks. Menket watched, his jaw clenched, his eyes dry. It was the way of things. Later that night, one of the beaten men, Ka-Men, sat beside him. His back was bleeding through his robe. "They'll forget by next week," he whispered. Menket nodded. "But we won't." The days blurred. Weeks passed. The pyramid grew. One morning, Menket stood and felt something in his chest. A tightness, a throb. Not pain, yet. He ignored it. The stone would not move itself. The shadow of the great monument, each day unfolded with grim predictability. The rhythm of labor was as familiar as breath. Pull, lift, set, rest, repeat. Menket began to recognize the new boys by the brightness in their eyes, the way they still believed this work had meaning or glory. They hadn't yet watched friends fall beside them or buried their tools with blood still sticky on the handle. Some brought dreams. Some brought poems. One, Kepi, a quiet boy who carried an amulet of Hathor, once sang while they worked. Not loudly, just softly, to himself, until the overseer caught him and broke his front tooth with the butt of a staff. He never sang again. Yet the songs stayed in Menket's mind, and sometimes, in the deep silence before dawn, he would mouth the words beneath his breath, like a prayer to no one. One day, a priest arrived, draped in fine linen, his fingers heavy with rings. He walked the construction site without speaking to the workers. He made gestures, pointing here, waving there. His presence meant something was changing. That evening, the overseers announced the addition of a second ramp, a new angle, a new technique the priests had demanded to please the gods. Menket looked at the structure. Another year's worth of hauling, another line in the sand, and still, the stars turned. That night, Nefret placed her hands on Menket's chest and whispered, "You don't look well." He shook his head, just tired. But she didn't believe him. She brought herbs, soaked in oil, and rubbed them into his skin. The scent of frankincense and myrrh filled the room. Menket closed his eyes. He dreamed of water, clean, flowing, blue as the sky. He dreamed of floating. Days later, the pain returned, this time sharper, beneath the ribs, radiating to his left shoulder. Still he rose with the others. Still he carried the rope. But when the horn blew and the sledge began to move, he faltered. A jolt of pain stabbed through his chest like a dagger. He staggered. His knees buckled. The world tilted. Then darkness. The rain was unrelenting in Stettin. Not a romantic drizzle, but the cold kind, the sort that dampened not just clothes, but ambition. Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, a thin and precocious German girl with eyes far too sharp for her station, pressed her hand against the frost-streaked window pane and stared out into the colorless sky. She was 14, already fluent in French, and secretly resented the scent of boiled cabbage that clung to every room in their drafty little household. She had learned early on to smile when expected, to nod when silence was preferred, and to listen even when no one thought she understood. Her mother, an ambitious and austere woman, filled their parlor with talk of courts, alliances, and imperial marriages. Her father, less important, spent his days among books and retired generals. But it was Sophie's mother who arranged everything, the meetings, the letters, the ambition. Russia. That cold and distant land of fur and faith, an empire ruled by Empress Elizabeth, and soon, perhaps, by Sophie's future husband, the awkward and unstable Grand Duke Peter. When the invitation came, it wasn't an invitation at all. It was a summons. So began the transformation. Sophie would not remain Sophie. She would become Ekaterina Alexeyevna, and eventually Catherine the Great. The road to the Russian throne was not paved with romance, nor sealed with loyalty. It was a path forged in cold corridors and silent observation. Sophie arrived in Russia in 1744. She was 15, rail-thin, with hollow cheeks, feverish ambition, and a relentless ability to adapt. She learned the Russian language with furious precision, practiced Orthodox rituals until they bled into her dreams, and smiled at every courtier with the calculated grace of someone who knew the cost of not being liked. Her marriage to Peter came swiftly. The ceremony was grand, the man was not. Peter was strange, that much everyone agreed upon. He idolized Frederick the Great of Prussia, despised Russian traditions, played with toy soldiers into his 20s, and often insulted his wife in public. He drank too much, trusted too little, and ruled not with force, but with confusion. Catherine watched and waited. She wrote in secret, diaries, letters, political philosophy. She read Voltaire, corresponded with Diderot, and hid Enlightenment ideals beneath layers of etiquette. Every conversation, every glance, every misstep by Peter was noted, catalogued, filed away. In 1762, Empress Elizabeth died. Peter ascended the throne. He reigned for 6 months. And then, he didn't. A coup d'etat, quiet and efficient, no bloody revolution. Just an empress with a pen and a few loyal guards. Peter was arrested. A week later, he was dead. The cause? Officially, illness. Unofficially, no one asked twice. Catherine was now empress, not by inheritance, but by will, by intellect, by sheer, brutal necessity. Her rule began not with celebration, but with suspicion. A foreigner, a woman, a usurper. Yet she ruled with astonishing poise. She toured the empire, she listened to governors, she issued edicts, she patronized the arts, she invited philosophers, she built cities, she reformed schools, she wrote constantly. Essays, manifestos, memoirs. Her pen never rested. She expanded Russia's borders through diplomacy and war. Crimea, Poland, the Black Sea. Her armies marched. Her treaties reshaped maps. Yet she was no saint of progress. She maintained serfdom, even as she quoted Rousseau. She punished rebellion, even while praising liberty. When Pugachev rose, in the name of the peasantry, she responded with overwhelming force. Villages burned, thousands died. Catherine's brilliance lay in contradiction. She was enlightened and autocratic, visionary and ruthless. A philosopher on paper, a monarch in blood. She ruled not from the throne alone, but from the salon. In her ornate chambers in the Winter Palace, beneath chandeliers of Czech crystal and tapestries embroidered in gold, she held court with men who were philosophers by trade and strategists by accident. She sipped tea with men who had written treatises on reason and progress, and then went to bed knowing that serfs across her empire still lived in wooden huts without roofs. Diderot visited her in St. Petersburg. She paid him well and listened to his ideas with a smile that did not reach her eyes. He spoke of freedom, She thought of order. He spoke of revolution. She thought of control. "Your words are beautiful," she once said to a visiting thinker, "but they would burn a country to the ground." And she meant it. Catherine saw in the Enlightenment a tool, not a religion. It was a means to refine autocracy, not replace it. She read books in bed and issued reforms with her morning wine. She wrote plays, published essays, and dabbled in architectural theory. She demanded statues be built in her likeness, not out of vanity, but out of calculation. A ruler had to be remembered. A woman ruler even more so. She modernized Russia's legal code, expanded hospitals, improved infrastructure, and championed inoculation against smallpox. But when the peasants rose against her, led by Yemelyan Pugachev, a former soldier who claimed to be the deceased Peter III, Catherine responded with merciless efficiency. She labeled him a madman. She sent her generals. They crushed him. And then she erased him, not just from power, from memory. His followers were executed, villages razed, and tales of the rebellion suppressed. She had seen what revolutions did in France, and she would have none of it. Catherine's palace was a theater, every corridor a stage, every banquet a performance. She understood power was not just taken, it was worn, displayed, spoken through every silk curtain and silver fork. She surrounded herself with beauty and brilliance, orchestras, paintings, philosophers, generals. Her court was one of excess, intellect, and spectacle. Yet behind it all was a mind that never rested. At night, when the torches burned low and the guests had left, Catherine wrote. She drafted laws. She revised history. She crafted her legacy. As the seasons passed, Catherine's vision of Russia's future sharpened like the edge of a finely honed blade. She was no mere figurehead, no ornamental empress to be whispered about in the shadows. She wielded power with purpose and precision, bending the vast Russian Empire to her will, while cloaking her ambition in the language of reason and reform. Yet, ruling an empire sprawling from the icy tundras of Siberia to the warm shores of the Black Sea was a task of staggering complexity. Each province held its own customs, dialects, and resentments. Serfs toiled endlessly under the yoke of their landlords, often without hope for relief. Nobles jealously guarded their privileges, wary of any change that might dilute their power. The Orthodox Church, an immense force, was both ally and obstacle, wielding spiritual authority over millions. Catherine's reforms touched many facets of society, yet were carefully measured not to provoke too great a backlash. She sought to modernize administration by creating new provincial governments with appointed officials accountable directly to the crown. This system was designed to reduce corruption and inefficiency, but also to tighten imperial control. Education became a passion. Catherine founded the Smolny Institute, the first state-funded school for noble girls in Russia, breaking with centuries of tradition that limited women's roles. She corresponded with European intellectuals and sent young Russians abroad to study, hoping to bring back the ideas that would propel Russia into the modern age. However, for all her progressive gestures, she remained a staunch defender of the serfdom system. Serfs, essentially peasants bound to the land, comprised the vast majority of Russia's population. Their labor underpinned the empire's wealth, but offered them little freedom or dignity. Catherine understood the delicate balance between reform and maintaining the loyalty of the nobility whose power rested on serfdom. While she debated ideas of emancipation in her salons, in practice, she reinforced the landlord's authority. Her private life, much like her public persona, was layered with complexity and contradiction. She kept close companions and lovers, men who were often influential figures within her court and government. These relationships were not merely personal, they were also political alliances that helped her consolidate power. Rumors swirled in the capital about her affairs, yet Catherine remained unfazed, understanding that perception could be managed as skillfully as any battlefield maneuver. The grandeur of her court was legendary. Lavish balls, theatrical performances, and art collections rivaled any in Europe. Catherine commissioned portraits by the finest artists, sculptures that immortalized her strength and beauty, and expansive palaces that symbolized the empire's might. Yet beneath this glittering surface lay a ruler deeply engaged in the day-to-day challenges of governance, from balancing foreign diplomacy to quelling unrest in the hinterlands. In foreign policy, Catherine was equally astute. She skillfully navigated alliances and conflicts, expanding Russian influence at the expense of the Ottoman Empire and Poland. The partitions of Poland, executed in 3 stages between 1772 and 1795, erased the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth from the map, allowing Russia to absorb vast new territories. These moves earned her both admiration and condemnation, but solidified Russia's position as a European superpower. Despite these successes, Catherine's reign was not without turmoil. The Pugachev rebellion had exposed the simmering discontent among the peasantry and Cossacks, highlighting the fragile social order. To suppress further dissent, Catherine tightened internal security, deploying secret police and surveillance networks that monitored potential conspirators and dissidents. Her reign blended the enlightenment of reason with the iron fist of control. Her correspondence reveals a mind wrestling with ideals and realities. She admired the philosophy of liberty and justice, but was unyielding when it came to maintaining order and authority. Power, she wrote, is not to be entrusted to the mob, but wielded by those who understand its weight. By the end of her life, Catherine the Great had transformed Russia in ways no ruler before her had. She had expanded its borders, reformed its institutions, patronized the arts, and carved her name indelibly into history. Yet she left a complicated legacy, one of brilliance shadowed by ruthlessness, of enlightened ambition tempered by autocratic necessity. Her reign epitomizes the complex dance between progress and power, ideology and pragmatism. A vivid portrait of leadership at the crossroads of tradition and transformation. It begins with the jungle, dense, alive, breathing. The Chiapas highlands of southern Mexico hide their secrets well. For centuries, thick vines and dense canopies swallowed cities of stone, temples of light, and the voices of kings. But in 1994, under a quiet layer of soil within the ancient city of Palenque, archaeologists uncovered something that would change how we understand the Maya and how we understand women in ancient power. Her tomb was deep within Temple 13, a pyramid adjacent to the grand temple of the inscriptions, resting place of King Pakal the Great. But this was no ordinary burial. The chamber was painted blood red, and at its heart lay a stone sarcophagus. Inside, wrapped in layers of ceremonial fabric and centuries of silence, was the skeletal remains of a woman. Her bones were drenched in cinnabar, a vibrant, toxic red pigment made from mercury sulfide. The Red Queen. No name, no inscriptions, no identity carved in stone. Yet everything about the burial screamed status, power, divinity. The Maya were masters of the written word, of astronomy, of architecture. They charted Venus with staggering accuracy. They built aqueducts, palaces, and pyramids without metal tools. And they recorded everything: kings' lineages, battles, gods, eclipses, but not her name. She was buried with jade ornaments, sacred green symbols of life and status. Her face was adorned with a death mask made of malachite and obsidian. Her bones revealed she lived well into her 60s, rare for the era. And analysis of her remains showed she ate like royalty. Some believe she was Pakal's wife, Lady Tsakbu Ajah. Others, his mother. Whoever she was, she died around 600-700 CE during Palenque's Golden Age, a period of cultural brilliance and political complexity. And in her death, the Maya buried her as they would a king. The Red Queen's tomb disrupts long-held assumptions about the role of women in Maya civilization. Often, ancient societies are seen through a male-dominated lens: kings, priests, warriors. But this burial suggests that women, too, could be divine rulers, cosmic intermediaries, embodiments of the gods. Her chamber echoed the underworld.
The Maya believed in Xibalba, a subterranean realm of trials, monsters, and transformation. The tomb's red walls mirrored blood and rebirth. Her cinnabar-soaked bones symbolized the sacred union of death and life. To the Maya, red was not just a color, it was power. Ritual offerings surrounded her: obsidian blades, conch shells, carved bones. These were tools of transformation, signals of her passage into the next realm. Even the placement of the tomb, near Pakal's, suggests dynastic significance. In Maya cosmology, burial placement mirrored cosmic order. To rest beside a king was no accident. And yet, she is silent. No stela, no glyphs, no voice. But her silence speaks. The Maya understood gender differently than modern societies. Their gods included both male and female aspects. Their mythology was fluid, their political systems complex. In some city-states, women ruled in their own right. They led rituals, inherited thrones, shaped diplomacy. The Red Queen's discovery forces scholars to re-examine their biases. Perhaps her name was never lost, perhaps it was erased, or perhaps her power was meant to transcend identity, to be symbolic, eternal, a bridge between this world and the next. She was buried not with subservience, but with cosmic dignity. Her death mask, crafted from sacred stone, was not designed to preserve memory, but to preserve presence. She was meant to remain. Even after the jungle swallowed her city, even after centuries passed, even after her name turned to dust, to uncover her tomb Archaeologists had to descend stone corridors in darkness. They had to crawl through narrow passages, breathe the ancient air, disturb the dead. And when they opened the sarcophagus, when the red powder rose like smoke, they knew this was not merely history, it was myth reawakened. Some of the excavators fell ill. They called it the curse of the Red Queen. But others knew better. They knew what had been disturbed, the ancient order, the sacred balance, the silence that had endured for over 1,000 years. And now she is awake, not with words, but with presence. Deep within the burial chamber, the cinnabar dust still clung to the stone as if it resisted time. It wasn't just pigment, it was purpose. Mercury sulfide, brilliant red, deadly to the living, sacred to the dead. The Maya had used it before, but never in such quantity. When the Red Queen's bones were lifted, the archaeologists wore gloves, masks, and caution like armor. But for the Maya, it was protection of a different kind, a shield between worlds. The Red Queen's burial was both a passage and a proclamation. What message did it send? To understand her role, we must understand the Maya world, not as a past civilization, but as a living philosophy. The Maya didn't simply bury their elite, they rebirthed them. A tomb wasn't an end, but a door. Each artifact, each shard of jade, each line of pigment was part of a ritual choreography meant to secure cosmic balance. To be buried like this, drenched in red, masked in stone, placed beside a king, wasn't just honor, it was divinity. And this divinity was female. Scholars have argued, was she Lady Tsakbu Ajah, the principal wife of Pakal? Or perhaps his mother, Sak Kuk, the queen who reigned before her son and set the stage for Palenque's golden age? If she was Sak Kuk, then the story becomes even more profound. Sak Kuk wasn't a regent. She wasn't a placeholder. She was a queen in her own right. Her rule began when Palenque faced political chaos and dynastic threat. It was she who stabilized the kingdom. She who maneuvered her son onto the throne. She who may have been the real architect behind Pakal's success. The Maya understood that power came not just from bloodlines, but from cosmic favor. Queens weren't passive ornaments. They were priestesses, diplomats, warriors of ritual. The Red Queen's tomb, regardless of her exact identity, reflects this reality. Yet, if she was so powerful, why no name? Perhaps, for the Maya, names were not always essential to legacy. Status and alignment with the divine mattered more than memory etched in glyphs. Or perhaps her name was there once, lost to erosion, stolen by time, or silenced by successors. Maya women appear in art as mediators between gods and humans. Some wear feathered headdresses and bear the staff of rulership. Others are depicted in bloodletting ceremonies, powerful rituals of sacrifice and cosmic communication. These were not the acts of shadows, they were central, visible, vital. And yet, in Western interpretations, Maya queens were long sidelined, relegated to supportive roles, if acknowledged at all. The Red Queen defies that erasure, not by what she says, but by how she was buried. The positioning of her tomb beside Temple of the Inscriptions is no small detail. Pakal's tomb is monumental, covered in glyphs, and adorned with a sarcophagus lid showing him descending into the underworld, only to be reborn as the Maize God, a figure of resurrection and renewal. The Red Queen, by being buried so close and in similar grandeur, mirrors that mythology. Maize, in Maya belief, was life itself. Gods were maize, kings were maize, the dead returned through maize, and the red of cinnabar, blood, fertility, the sun as it rose. In this sacred calculus, the Red Queen's role becomes clearer. She wasn't a footnote, she was balance. In Maya cosmology, duality governed everything, light and dark, male and female, life and death. Pakal, the Sun King, needed his counterpart, his celestial twin, his anchor in the underworld. She was that twin. Where he journeyed down through the tree of life, she stood at the crossroads. Where he emerged into renewal, she ensured the gates remained open. Let's pause then and imagine her funeral. The year is 640 CE. The jungle hums with summer. Priests chant in Chol, incense curling into spirals above carved altars. The people of Palenque have gathered, dressed in cotton cloaks and feathered headdresses, their feet bare on limestone. They do not weep. They offer blood, jade, corn. The Red Queen is carried through the plaza, not on a litter, but on memory. Her mask glints in the fading sun. Her bones, wrapped in embroidered cloth, are heavy not with age, but with reverence. Into the temple she goes, down stone stairs, through narrow passageways, into eternity. Imagine now a world layered in myth, where every tree, every star, every stone breathes with ancestral memory. In the Maya world, reality was not linear. It was cyclical, sacred, multidimensional. Time was not something that passed. It was something that lived. Each burial was not an end, but a hinge in this wheel of time. The Red Queen was not buried to be forgotten. She was installed, like a deity returned to the earth, a necessary balance to the celestial bodies she once communed with in life. Archaeologists working in Temple 13 did more than uncover bones. They peeled back a layer of consciousness. Each tool buried with her, each bead of jade, each fragment of incense stone, told stories encoded in ritual, not in glyph. These were not simple funerary practices. They were declarations. The mask placed over her face wasn't just to preserve appearance. It was to allow her to see in the afterlife. Malachite, with its green hues, symbolized regrowth and breath. It wasn't an aesthetic choice. It was cosmological technology. Even the air in her tomb was different, heavy, metallic from the cinnabar, but alive, as if her breath had lingered for centuries, waiting to be heard. And when researchers entered, when the camera flashbulbs lit the space and centuries of shadow dissolved, the silence that followed was not empty, it was waiting. We don't need her name carved in stone to understand her impact. We can feel it in the meticulous architecture of her chamber, in the 6-ton stone slab covering her tomb, a slab that required tremendous human effort and planning to lower into place without cracking. Such resources were not spent lightly. This was no ceremonial token burial. It was a sovereign send-off. One of the most profound truths to emerge from the Red Queen's rediscovery is how modern interpretations of ancient power are often flawed by our own lenses. The early scholars of Mesoamerica, many of whom operated during colonial or patriarchal eras, saw the Maya through their own mirrors. They imagined male-dominated hierarchies and assumed women were exceptions. anomalies. But the Red Queen's tomb says otherwise. The Maya understood rulership as a deeply spiritual role. Kings and queens alike were embodiments of cosmic principles, chosen not just through blood, but through alignment with divine forces. Rulership was performance, yes, but also ritual, sacrifice, vision. Power was woven into their skin, carried through their blood, and enacted in public ceremony. In this world, a queen could be a mediator, a bloodletter, a prophet, a mother of dynasties. She could descend into caves to speak to the ancestors and rise above temples to commune with the stars. That the Red Queen lay beside Pakal, whose own tomb is one of the most famous in all the Americas, shows that she was part of a dyad, a twin force of cosmic symmetry. Just as the sun requires the moon, Pakal required her. If she was Lady Tsakbu, then history must recognize her as one of the most influential women of the classic Maya era. Tsakbu was not simply Pakal's wife. She came from a noble lineage, likely arranged to marry into Palenque to stabilize political alliances. But she was not passive. She appears on 3 separate monuments beside Pakal, participating in bloodletting rituals and enthronement ceremonies. In Maya ideology, blood was sacred. It was the visible link between humans and gods. The act of drawing blood from the tongue, the earlobes, the genitals, was both sacrifice and communion. For women to participate in these rites meant they were full agents of power.
So imagine her, not hidden in shadow, but at the center of the court, seated upon the throne beside her husband, a woman who commanded respect, whose voice shaped law, myth, and diplomacy. She may have advised on war. She may have mediated disputes between powerful city-states like Calakmul or Tikal. She may have led processions through Palenque's sacred causeways, wearing jaguar pelts and obsidian blades. And when her time came, the Maya gave her the afterlife of a queen. In really any dominance, they made decisions in realms where only men were supposed to speak. The Red Queen may have done all of that, and for that perhaps someone sought to hide her, or perhaps they buried her so deeply, so deliberately, so beautifully that her memory would survive in silence until we were ready to listen. When we speak of queens, we often imagine thrones and jewels, but this queen ruled with fire and earth, with voice and silence, with ritual and mystery. Her chamber, hidden beneath layers of stone and centuries of jungle, was a cathedral of memory. Her death mask was her shield, her cinnabar was her robe, her bones were her testimony. She ruled from within the earth, from the echoes of ceremony, from the hush between worlds. And when we found her, when the dust was brushed from her face, when the chamber air shifted, when the first photograph captured her in red, we were not discovering her. We were remembering her. She never needed a name. She had power. And now, she has voice.